Now, the behavior of Hamas resulted in the strangulation of Gaza, in part due to, I think, irresponsible activities by Hamas, the silly use of missiles that are not, as they call them, resistance, but are rather irresponsible provocations. And these hardships that have been imposed on the people of Gaza are themselves irresponsible behavior by Israel, which has resulted in the strangulation of that little strip of land and denial of the people of very basic rights. It wasn't until the wall broke down a year ago and we saw people pouring out, desperate for food, desperate for medical services, desperate for any taste of freedom, that we realized how desperate the situation had become. Meanwhile, Israel's expansion in the West Bank and Jerusalem is making peace there virtually impossible. It's almost unbelievable for those of us who know the situation to see what the wall and the expansion of settlements and the checkpoints, etc., have done to daily life and the hopes and aspirations of people in that region. Now, Lebanon, no stranger to tragedy, has also witnessed more. The horrific assassination of Prime Minister Hariri and its aftermath exposed deep divisions in Lebanon. The forced departure of Syria provided an opportunity for people to bring Lebanon together. But what did we do? Instead of bringing Lebanon together, we instead compounded the divisions and helped pit Lebanon's people against themselves. Lebanon needed reconciliation and reform, and what we gave them instead was a notion of victor vanquished, supporting one side, hoping it would defeat the other side, and the result was paralysis, stalemate, and civil conflict. 2005, 2006 were disastrous in Iraq as well. What it witnessed was the acceleration of Iraq's dismemberment through sectarian conflict and ethnic cleansing. Sect and ethnic and ideologically based groups went against each other and picked over the bones of what is by now an already destroyed country. What's especially tragic about what was happening in Iraq is that in addition to the loss of lives and hope, there's been a systematic ethnic cleansing going on. And not enough attention has been paid to that. It is bizarre that people talk about the surge succeeding. And because some politicians believe it and other politicians are afraid to confront it, we go on thinking that actually the situation is getting better. It is not. 4.5 million Iraqis, 1/5 of the population of that country. Imagine, 1/5 have been dislocated. Half of them are out of the country, afraid to go back. The other half are out of their homes, living as displaced people within their country, also afraid to return to their homes. And if you go into the city of Baghdad, divisions now are concretized with walls that separate neighborhood from neighborhood. It's true the violence is down, but the source of violence has accelerated because it's not just sect against sect and community against community, but neighborhood against neighborhood and armed camp against armed camp. And every one of the factions involved might be working with us, but they're working against each other, waiting for the opportunity that they can strike out again. Kurds want to expand their border. Shia parties want to dominate. Sunni parties want to get back into power. What is tragic about all of this is that while there was no substantive discussion in this country about Lebanon and Palestine, we had an opportunity to get Iraq right. The Iraq Study Group had an approach that could have worked. Now, there was a stupid debate going on in Congress between two poles. One said, we got to leave and leave now. And presidential candidates echoed them. Bill Richardson saying, oh, I'll get them out tomorrow. I'll start immediately. We'll move them out so fast you won't be able to count them on the way out. Republicans were saying, got to stay the course and got to continue to fight until victory, with no idea what victory would be or even if it was achievable. In the middle of this polarized debate, you had the Iraq Study Group come forward with two of the wisest men in a bipartisan way, Lee Hamilton on the one side and Jim Baker on the other hand, leading an effort to create a bipartisan consensus approach that acknowledged two things. One is we had to leave, but the other that we had to leave responsibly. And so they put forward a plan. And what was interesting to me was I remember the election of 2006 when Democrats won, and it was fascinating to notice that night as the TV anchors were saying to the members of Congress, to Democrats, now, what are you going to do now that you've won? What are you going to do about Iraq? And they said, well, we're going to wait and see what the Iraq Study Group says. And then Republicans were asked, what do you think will happen now in Iraq, now that the Democrats have won? And they said, well, we got to wait and see what happens with the Iraq Study Group. Well, they all waited, and it came out, and then they all ignored it. What happened was the Democratic majority didn't act on it, and President Bush ignored it at first, and then when pressed, began to cherry pick a piece here and a piece there, but in no way did he understand the comprehensive vision that it involved and how it would have worked. Current calm in Iraq is not due to the surge, and we need to understand that. Rather, it's the result of a series of worrisome internal developments. First, there are objectives being served by all factions who are doing quite well. They're happy with the current situation. The Kurds are in control of their region, and they're sitting pretty. But as all too often they've done in the past, they will, in fact, overplay their hand. They still want to take control of Kirkuk. They still want to expand their border and declare independence, and I believe they've already overplayed their hand with oil revenues, with housing the PKK, which has brought Turkey and Iran into the bombings in northern Iraq. The situation there is volatile. And Sunni groups who are now armed and paid for by the United States, I think to the tune of $90 million a month, are playing for time, seeking to regain influence in the country. Now, they find it increasingly difficult being accepted by the Shia majority into the military and government, and tensions there remain. And they are becoming increasingly frustrated with their relationship with the United States. And as I noted, Baghdad itself is divided, a checkerboard of neighborhoods that are set against each other, and stability there is deceiving. And in the south, among the Shia, there is a constant contest between factions. They're armed, and they have dramatically different visions of what the future of the country should be. They're not fighting because their domestic and internal sponsors don't want to exacerbate the conflict while they're working for an American departure, but because each of the component groups have made tactical decisions to stand down. We have to remember it's a tactical decision to stand down, and it won't last long. Iran, now emboldened in Iraq and calling the shots for many of the groups in Iraq, is also emboldened in the broader Gulf. And with its ties to Hezbollah and other groups in the region, one might say Iran is the victor of the entire war. It's the beneficiary of a failed Bush administration policy. This is the stage we're on. It's the stage that was set not only by the failed policies of 2004 that led up to 2004, but it's the failed policies from 2004 to where we are today. The question is, what role will we play now? Will we accept and understand the situation we're in? Will we now finally have the national debate that we not only need, but that we deserve as a people that would have us move forward? We're at risk. Our interests are at risk, our allies are at risk, if we continue to stay the course, if we continue to pursue this path. I believe soon we will be at a tipping point where there will be no ability to salvage the situation and move forward. Now, despite our obvious military might, we're already witnessing a dramatic decrease of American leadership in the Middle East. It's Turkey that is negotiating between Syria and Israel. It's Egypt that negotiated the recent and fragile Hamas-Israel truce. It's Germany that mediated the prisoner exchange between Israel and Hezbollah. The warring Lebanese factions forged a compromise with Qatar, and now they're dealing with France. Palestinian factions have gone to Yemen and now Senegal, of all places, to reach an agreement. And the various parties in Iraq trek regularly to Iran to get support and guidance. The bottom line is this. We've gone from being the greatest power to a humiliated power. We still have power, but we're losing ground and losing prestige in a region where we have critical interests at stake.